PS5 Pro again. The CPU increases are quite modest, and it's been said on the podcast that it's not going to magically open up 60 FPS in CPU limited games that are currently 30. What about 40 FPS? Do you see developers / Sony adding more 40 FPS modes to Pro enhanced titles, games? Oliver, what do you think? I'm just trying to do the maths in my head here. 10%. I mean, the gulf between a 25 millisecond and a 16 millisecond frame time isn't really bridged by 10%. You're going to need overhead left over on the base PS5 game, I would have imagined.
Yes. I think 40 FPS is more of a possibility, but I would say that if you have a game that is strictly CPU limited, much of the time, like Dragon's Dogma 2, for instance, a 10% performance bump on the CPU, a 10% clock bump on the CPU is not going to get you a 33% boost to performance, which is what you need to go from 30 to 40. But I would say that if you have a game that's already pretty close to 40 FPS, it might do it. But I would kind of think that the more plausible thing would basically be a developer that can hit their image quality targets with 40 FPS on a PS5 Pro, couldn't do it on a PS5, but doesn't have that CPU overhead to go all the way to 60 with like PSSR and really pushing up that image quality boat a little bit, bringing it in a little bit rather, to hit a higher frame rate. That's what I would kind of think of, is not so much the CPU is enabling it, but rather the GPU is enabling it, or at least the CPU is only getting them like that little bit over the line and not really helping them traverse this massive gulf that there is between 30 and 40 when it comes to these very CPU limited games, which is what we see in titles like Dragon's Dogma 2.
Alex?
Same response. I don't think it's enough, but I think it could lead to a PS. Like, I think this box anyways is going to be targeting these power users. If that is targeting the hardcore user. Power user is not, it's a console, like targeting the hardcore user who is really invested in the ecosystem and who is excited about things like 40 FPS modes. So I think that's one thing that they've pushed already on PS5 that is a differentiating factor between them and Xbox, these 40 FPS modes. And so, yeah, I'd expect even more of them in the future. And those, they'll probably, I think they'll be there on PS5 though, too, if they're there already. Yeah.
I think it's fair to point out that basically nobody except Sony and Asobo Studio is doing 40 FPS modes by the look of it. Have I missed anyone out?
Yeah, I can't think of any off the top of my head, quite honestly.
Yeah, a 10% bump to CPU power won't really make too much difference, but it will increase stability on those 40 FPS modes. And if you're at like 120 hertz LFC mode, good thing. But we're kind of approaching niches here. But then again, the PlayStation 5 Pro may well be a niche product based on the specification bumps we're getting. We just don't really know at the moment. Generally, I'd like to see more 40 FPS modes, but it does seem to be that they're kind of like value adds. They're not really built in the kind of way you'd expect. And it is only Sony that's really taking that particularly seriously. Don't really have too much more to say about that. I mean, we do need to learn more about the PS5 Pro because, obviously we've seen the developer disclosures, but maybe things will come more into focus once we actually see some games and once we actually see some demos, as they did with PS4 Pro, which back in the day, it didn't really seem to make that much sense, but kind of did once you actually saw it. And maybe there's more to this than all meets the eye.